Now, good morning, Matt. How are you going?
Right, Rob, yourself?
Yeah, doing good. Look, this is probably another one of those videos where I have to kind of jump in a bit more, only because I think my office is set up a little bit better to do the comparison. So today we're just going to go to video number 3 on the ICue conversation, ICue listening, ICue engagement method. And I'm going to leave our conversation that we had up yesterday, but I'm going to flip to a piece of software that you can use to show others how the whole process of ICue listening works. And so what I've moved to here is a piece of software called OmniGraffle that works very well to show things in layers. So we have behind us our thumbnail dipped in tar kind of map. And what I've done is I've simply transferred this to this whiteboard online, and what's on the screen is exactly what's on the screen there. It's just a collection of words which we captured. So we just call this the capture stage. When we start drawing relational links between each one, you can see why this idea, this method works so well. So what's missing in many, many risk assessments and risk management tools and risk analysis tools is then there's no way to visualize relationships in the design of a typical risk assessment or an audit tool or some sort. There's no way. You can't visualize the verbal. And what we've got here is a tool that helps visualize what went on verbally between you and me in a conversation yesterday. And although the conversation was really only just an example, we had to talk about Christmas and so on. The purpose is to show how this actually works as a method. And so even in the first 2 stages using this software, if I close down those, you can see we start off with a blank board. And this is one of the beauties of the ICue engagement board or the ICue method, is it's not a checklist. It's a blank, open sheet of paper. And the only guidance you're given is an icon for workspace, an icon for headspace, an icon for group space, and an icon that represents the holistic person, head, heart, and gut. But then, sorry.
Well, just jump in here and say it's interesting. If we had yesterday's conversation and we typically dot pointed it and put it on a piece of paper, it'd have absolutely no relational ability, and everyone's wondering how on earth you arrived at Matt's phone.
And it's why checklists tend not to work.
Yeah.
Because the design of a checklist doesn't help you learn about relationships. The design of a spreadsheet is very, very good for managing data in a spreadsheet, but spreadsheets can't show relationship. Spreadsheets can't show sociality. And because my interest is the social psychology of risk, then you need a tool and a method that can show that. And so I made 20 years ago this model, and it is a visual, verbal, semiotic mapping method. And the reason why it works compared to spreadsheets, tables, and dot points is it is social and relational. And you learn that the moment you do it. We capture the words we exchanged yesterday. Then what we do is we simply link how the conversation flowed from where to where. And this is not hard. We started by talking about the topic of Christmas. You, for some reason, went to the John Martin's Myer retail pageant and said it was the benchmark, that a commercial benchmark that triggered the work of all Christmas and Christmas leaves and lights for everyone in Adelaide. So that's the location. Everyone in Adelaide knows that Christmas starts when that pageant runs. And that's how our conversation started. And then we went from there to somehow it's an unspoken tradition. And the conversation then went to a family tradition. And we can talk about the things that came out of that after. And then we went to a personal tradition over here. But the word tradition really triggered the continuing conversation. Now, at no time did I have any idea where the conversation was going to go. And again, that's another part of this design. When you do an audit or a spreadsheet or a checklist that's been designed, usually by an engineer, when you do them, the outcome is already pre-designed into that checklist, into that dot point set. What you get with this is an open and free-flowing outcome where you have no idea where it's going to go. So you follow the flow of the person you're listening to. You don't get dictated to by the directionality and the design of a checklist. Once you've got a checklist that's been designed by someone else that you're using, then you actually have preordained what the outcome will be, because the checklist directs you to the philosophy of the designer of that checklist.
And we'd say a middle line there, totally in workspace. Okay, we've got a tree, we got presents, we got a turkey. That's a successful Christmas.
Yeah, that's right. But what actually happened is because you mentioned the word tradition, and I followed that, we went from the unspoken tradition in Adelaide to get Christmas started, a conflict between Northern Hemisphere snow and the heat and the 40 degrees we get in Adelaide, which was all that kind of small talk stuff, which is what ICue listening does. But then what we do is there's in ICue, we follow the flow, not my intention, not my bias, but what your flow is. So the whole purpose of a normal audit is the power is focused on the auditor. The whole purpose of this method is the power is focused on you. We only go where you want to go. If you don't want to go there and you don't give it as a gift, then we're not going to find out that your siblings and your sisters went to visit your father's who's unwell, which is actually the crunch of the conversation. We could have stayed up here and talk about, well, how many floats are in the pageant? Do they use black tires or do they use white tires in the pageant? Are the trucks fully audited? Do they do safety checks on the tires of the trucks? Do they inflate the tires to the right pressure? Are the floats all audited for safety guards? Do the people who march in the street, do they have a... I mean, that's where traditional safety goes. It stays up here the whole time. The whole purpose of ICue listening is to get down here as quick as we can.
Yep.
And most people in their unconscious want to go there anyway. Who wants to keep talking about the 100-year history of the John Martin's Myers pageant? I don't know who would want to do that, but you could if you were an auditor.
Yeah.
See, I don't give a shit how many floats are in the Myers retail pageant. I couldn't care less. I'm much, much more interested in the fact that your father has dementia, he's 86 in aged care, and this is what matters to you.
Yeah. This is the stuff that is the crux of life. It's not how many clowns showed up on Saturday.
Yeah, well, and, is traffic control, does the Myers, pageant have traffic control for people walking on the streets in a clown suit? Yeah, well, okay, that may be interesting, but if we started talking about pageants and clown suits, we're not engaging at all. No. That's not engagement. You might as well go to an encyclopedia. But because I'm talking to you, then things unfold as you listen to the other person. You can actually do an audit and not listen to anyone. You can do a checklist and not listen to anyone. The whole purpose of this design is visual, verbal, relational, social outcome. And that's why this works. So when we go to the next level, we have this level here, which just appeared. I'll make it disappear. We have two things we look at once we've done the capture stage. We then look at gifts and metaphors. Now, a gift is something that I didn't ask for, but you freely gave to me unconsciously. And a metaphor is a very special kind of expression that describes something by what it isn't. And both of these are so important within the social psychology of risk that we have a standard kind of tip. So if you're listening to someone and they give you a gift or they give you a metaphor, stop talking about the pageant and traffic control and just say, oh, can you tell me more about this? An open question. So you chase the gifts, you chase the metaphors. And that is kind of like a bit of a rule for how to do a successful ICue engagement. And the moment you said your dad was not well yesterday, I went, wow, I didn't ask you about that. I actually asked you about family traditions and things like that. And you from there jumped and said, well, in fact, for Christmas, my sisters are coming to visit Dad from Melbourne, and I think one's in Geelong. And we went straight to the crux of where the real issue is, because this for you was your unconscious self telling me that you maybe even went to the pageant, but I don't want to talk about the pageant. Yep.
Yeah.
Your unconscious really wants to talk about the most important thing in your life, which is your dad's not well.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the next stage is we actually give value to the transactions. And so now we're moving from simply the capture now to analysis. So when I do this in, say, an instant investigation, or I do this in any kind of conversation, when I capture it and put it in this software, I then can do very much a very, very deep dive into what might be hidden in the conversation. So the first thing I do is I simply give a value to the lines. So I give a plus if the language connecting the two was positive. I give an equals here if the language associated with the conversation was kind of a neutral comment. So, for example, talking about John Martin's retail being a commercial product is pretty much just a statement of fact. But making a comment about the work of Christmas and Christmas trees and Christmas lights is a negative in a sense. That's why it's in negative workspace, because there's an outcome for this. And if we wanted to, we could subtly link it back and say, well, so here we go. Let's go back to John Martin's here. Let's go back to Johnny Martin's and let's ask ourselves, does he have a pure motive? Does John Martin's do this just to celebrate Christmas, or is there a commercial advantage out of this? Well, of course it's a commercial advantage. And how many ever years ago it was started, the pageant is not some sort of neutral event. It's to create business. It's to sell things. So we could easily loop that, but here's how the tool works. And then I could simply just give that a red line on this software, and I could emphasize it and say, well, there's a hidden motive there, right? There's a hidden motive. Well, if it's we could then have gone the conversation. So, well, if there's a hidden motive there, does this little 10-year-old boy know about the hidden motive? I don't think so. It doesn't matter, does it?
No, they want little boy thinking of Christmas presents.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is how it works. And so the software can enable what we mapped yesterday. And in many senses, the software turns the ICue listening process, and you can go as deep as you like. So most people who train in ICue listening don't go any further than just this level. And that takes about a week to learn. When you get to advanced ICue listening and you then start to code this, you can then interrogate that conversation, and you all of a sudden start to see things that were unconsciously present in the conversation that at the time you were not thinking about. So, for example, when you started speaking about this unconscious Christmas tradition, that was a positive comment you made, and that led us in a positive way to family traditions and this idea of you put the angel on the tree. Now, I didn't give that a value but I'm just going to give it a value now, the angel on the tree. I'm going to give it an equals value because in a sense, that is a neutral comment. It's just something you do. But when we talk about it had a religious outcome, I put a negative on that because I'm interpreting that family tradition in a negative way. It could actually be for you a plus, right?
Yeah.
It could be a plus. So there is a sense in which all semiotic mapping involves an interpretation. And the reason why I put a negative on that family tradition is, yes, I know you do do an angel on the tree. Yes, I know it's religious. And yes, I know you're Catholic from that. And then at the same time, you believe in a fictional Santa. And I would add another state. So see, the box designates what I was thinking, not the circles which designate what you were thinking. And so what I was thinking about this, and I would ask you in another conversation, is how do you reconcile the idea of an angel on a tree, which comes from the Northern Hemisphere about snow, which has no connection to Australia at all? Neither does Santa. How do you reconcile the belief of these things in Christmas with the belief of this fictional Santa in Christmas? And you reconcile that with the concept of an angel. But we're not going to go there. I'm simply showing that in the map, I'm able to put those things in and still continue the conversation with what you're interested in.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to take this conversation in a second step on another time, I could say to you, Matt, can you tell me how you juggle the existence of an angel, which you said is real, and the non-existence of Santa, which you said is unreal?
That would be a very interesting conversation.
Yes, it would. But because part of this model is not to make a judgment, is what you do is you capture, you build and show relationships. And so I show this back to you, whether you're a safety risk client or whatever you are. When you use this, most people I know who then start to see the relationships between what they were telling me, it also helps them learn as well. So it's a semiotic, visual, verbal learning tool. And as you begin to see how I reflected and interpreted what you said, you can then correct that if you like, or we can go to a second conversation if you like, and even add to it, as I have, with the red line to the pageant from Work of Christmas being a commercial reality, to the interest of a 10-year-old boy who, of course, has no concept of the commercialization of Christmas. He just wants to know what present was given to him on Christmas Day.
And I think the other thing that we can point out here too, Rob, and we should possibly do this, the whole angel on the tree conversation. We can have this in 12 months' time.
Oh, yes.
An engagement board, and we're anchored to it, and it will still bring us right back to this conversation, and we'll be able to pick up where we left off.
Correct. And because, for example, in most coronial inquiries in risk and safety, they take 4 to 5 years to occur. Often you don't get these dynamics in any checklist or spreadsheet. But if in 4 years' time you have one of these maps in front of you, the relationships and the social nature of this map virtually helps you remember it all. And so it's through the visual that our memory is stimulated. And that's another hidden benefit of this kind of approach to risk assessment. Now, we're not talking about risk assessment, although we could easily go to risk assessment in this as well. So we've got physical risk up here about how do you put on a pageant on a street. Yep. Yeah. To the risk of an 86-year-old person in aged care, to the risk of siblings flying from Melbourne to Adelaide, from the risk of living on borrowed time, or, your metaphors there. But we didn't do that. This is the scope of what this model can take you. So far, let me go through the stages. We have an open template. We don't know where we're going to go. We capture a conversation simply by noting keywords, phrases, etc. We also note language which the listener used or they sent in, and then we start to build relational links. Then we give those links values, plus, equals, or minus, whether that determines whether the comment was a positive, a negative, or a neutral, and that involves some degree of interpretation. When I show that back to you, you can easily contradict that and say, Rob, see where you've got that negative there? See that negative there? That shouldn't be there. We see that in our tradition as a positive. And I say, good, well, I'll fix that up. And then we do this one here, and I'll see that the angel on the tree and that whole religious thing is a positive. And so you can actually correct the conversation in a second view. You imagine that on a checklist or on a table in an audit where you said, now, can I hand this audit back to you and you tell me if I got it right?
Yeah. And yeah, it'll be a mess in 30 seconds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the very next thing in the social psychology of risk we note is what we call the dialectic. It's the fault line. It's the tension point. It's the dynamic thing, the most dynamic thing, which in a way is hidden in conversation, but in the mapping, you make it dominant. Now, you did not yesterday say, my sister's visiting my father is a tension point. You didn't say that that is even so for you. But in my interpretation of that conversation, the fact that your sisters are flying from Melbourne and Geelong to see a very unwell father for the Christmas period and all the effort that entails tells me not only is it going to be a tension point, because here's the father with dementia who doesn't even know who they are, correct?
Yeah.
So I'm going to fly halfway across the country, get off a plane, stay in some location, jump in a car, drive to the aged care home, see the person who I love, who might even say, there's strange women in my room. The nurse, can you get them out of my room?
Yeah, and assuming he survives to Christmas.
Yeah, that's right. Well, when I come to that level, I've got them up in the corner here. It's another layer we put in. Tell me more about dad, sisters, and the stress of doing this. And what if your dad dies before Christmas? They're thoughts I had. And so when you do the ICue mapping, you can actually, hang on, let me just put that off. When you do the ICue mapping in this way, you can add all kinds of things which are speculations, such as these are speculations I thought about, but I never talked about them.
I like how you put down, so we've got the dialectic there in bold black, but you're positive on it. Now, when we say things are held in tension, that's everybody having a negative sense. But no,
Well, we don't know what's going to come out of that. And this dialectic between your sisters and your unwell father could be a very positive learning experience for your sisters. There's nothing more stressful for a child to go to their dementia parent who doesn't know who they are and love them. Very, very hard to love a dementia patient who says, can you get this person out of my room, please? To the nurse. And so the plus I put in is a plus for learning. Now, if you want to change that, we can. But here's the point. In the ICue engagement process, and this is the open subjectivity of the process, we acknowledge that subjectivity is part of the process. If you're doing an audit and a risk assessment in dot points on a checklist, there's no acknowledgement of all that the witness to the accident or a person who was in the accident have any contribution towards the investigation of the accident. It's all about the power of the investigator and the analysis of the investigator using a pre-designed checklist. This is completely different from that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone to this dialectic level, which is where is the tension point and the fault line in the conversation we had. And it's from within this tension point that we discover so many things if the conversation was to go further. Simple questions like, how do you and your sisters visit your dad? What do you kind of do? Do you take him a cake? Do you sit beside him? Do you play music? Do you just have a cup of coffee and a chat? Do you go for a walk and so on? But there's all sorts of things we could talk about that involve learning. And I could even ask questions about, you know, how do you tolerate and love your dad when he's not the same person you used to know? You said he's left the building. You've said he's on borrowed time. How do you manage that?
Yeah.
We didn't, but that's where this can go. There is no design within traditional risk and safety that allows that kind of movement.
No, the traditional risk and safety is driven to an outcome. Yeah, that is normally, hang on, the company is not at fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. But is open to, yeah.
And one of the benefits of this, Matt, which is, I'm glad you raised that, is the purpose of an ICue engagement board is not to fix anything.
Yeah.
The facilitator, the listener, I'm not there to fix. One of the big traditions in risk and safety is the safety advisor comes out and it's his whole job to fix the problem. Here's the hazard, I've got to fix it. In the social psychology of risk, I'm not there to fix anything. I'm here with this board to show to you, like a mirror back in your face, here's what you're telling me. Here's what your unconscious is saying. I'm going to make the unconscious conscious to you, and then I'll leave it up to you. You can then make the next move.
And Rob, we've known each other for 10 years now.
Yeah.
In the intervening 24 hours since the last video and this discussion, you have not, and we've had, I think, 3 conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've tried to fix any of my problems or me.
No.
Yeah.
No. And when I look at this huge issue of dementia, it's very, very similar to if you have someone in your workplace who has a mental health issue.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Now, oh, gee, that's really good, safety person. Tell me how you're going to fix that. You have no qualifications in mental health, no qualifications in social psychology or psychology. You have no qualification, and you're going to go to a person with a significant mental health issue and you're going to fix it. Good. Fantastic. Tell me how you're going to do that.
Even, assuming that you know anything that's underlying from that mental health issue.
Of course not. And that's, I mean, this latest thing that was brought out as a standard on psychosocial health by Standards Australia or Safety, so that just blows my brains out.
That's a topic for another video.
It's a topic for another video. Okay, so let's move on to the next layer.
Simple.
So once we've got the dialectic, we can then involve what I call temperaments. There are 4 basic temperaments that come from Jungian psychology, and all we do is we map them onto the conversation. So sensate judging is about detail. Sensate perceiving is about play. Intuitive thinking is about ideas. And intuitive feeling is about emotional harmony. And so you can then look at the flow of various things. When we were up in Workspace, just talking about the detail of the pageant, there was nothing of any great importance there, not certainly to you or I. The moment we got down here to the most critical issue, we then transferred away from looking for detail to then canvassing a whole bunch of feelings coming around these gifts you gave me and so on. So that then can be added in. So I'm just going to close them. So you can add that to analysis. That's another layer that was present and unconscious, but this board makes it visual. You can see what was running. Another thing we do is we can show cultural values, right? So there are 4 cultural values. There's autocracy, bureaucracy, adhocracy and democracy, D over here. And you can add political values to what's going on. So, for example, when you give your carrot and your milk and you have your 8 traditional bites for the fictional Santa if somehow comes to your house, that's done with you and your children. When you run through your family traditions of the angel on the tree, that's done with your children. When you have an unspoken tradition, that's pretty ad hoc politically. But when we think of the work of Christmas and the commercialization of Christmas, the bureaucracy around making Christmas work, Christmas trees, Christmas cards, Christmas lights, is like, that's all about the power of organizing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's another layer we can think of, the political layer, using this particular map. And I'll take them away at the moment. But I'll tell you what's funny is I don't know any risk and safety tool anywhere that helps and designs for you to think about the political dynamics at work in an audit, or the ethical dynamics in an audit. In risk and safety, it's like politics and ethics are the no-nos. We don't think about them.
Yeah, it is the elephant in the room.
Yes, yeah. And yet you would think this conversation we had yesterday, there was nothing political happening going on. Oh, yes, there was. If you did the carrot and the milk without involving your children, and you didn't do it in a democratic way, you did it in an autocratic way, that would completely destroy the tradition. And so politically, the pageant, how does the pageant occur? Well, it's really simple. The powers that be tell you there's going to be a pageant. You don't get any choice, and it's going to run regardless of whether you go or not. It's not ad hoc. The planning behind that and the bureaucracy behind that is insane. Apparently, they plan that pageant 12 months in advance.
Yeah, I think January, they'll start for the November.
Yeah. And then when it comes to something like an unspoken tradition that's ad hoc, that has completely no structure at all around it. Yeah. So there is a political value to these, and we map them. Another thing we map is learning styles. And there are 8 learning styles, and we actually include them, and I'll just open that map. We include them in the way we think about how is the learning going on here, and we can codify that. So all of those who learn ICue engagement with me learn the 8 ways of learning. You can be people smart, self smart, logic smart, word smart, picture smart, and so on. I'll get rid of that. And then you can code that. So what's happening is your sister's engagement with your father is you have to be people smart to do that, right? Now, if you're up here, I could put another one. I could put logic smart up here to run the Johnny Martin's pageant and to work that commercially in a bureaucratic way is all about a very logical, mathematical way of working. I could have put a code up there for that. But what I really did is I put the points, the critical points where person-centeredness was important in our conversation. And look at it. It's all huddling around what do we learn? What do we learn by being sensitive to an 86-year-old dementia person who's basically left the building?
Mm.
And there's a lot of learning going on in there because, as we know, if someone has a mental health problem or a dementia issue or whether they're got any of those kinds of psychological disorders, you're pretty much powerless.
This is where you learn more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You learn more about yourself. And so all I want to note was in my map, just help again with my reflection, is where was the person-centeredness? So again, in the map, we can add that and we can start to think about learning. So we can then add the learning styles like that. We can add the political part like that. We can add the temperaments like that. and so on. So the software allows you to drill down at such a deep level. I then often put some stickies of things I would maybe go to in a second conversation. And I do this exactly the same. If you're a forklift driver in a manufacturing site, Matt, and I mapped this for you, and I said, look, let's talk about it next time. I'd show you the map and I'd say, look, here's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. Would you like to talk about them as well? And so we go on. So, and then finally on this map, we actually use further icons to map the workspace, headspace, group space activities going on. And we do that iconically to show that here is someone giving direction in physicality to someone else. Here is someone in psychological space giving direction to someone else. Here, when we're talking about dementia, we're talking about a psychological idea to each other. And when we're talking about your sisters and Matt visiting a father who's unwell, we're sharing conversations between workspace, headspace, and group space all together. And so this, again, stimulates even further understanding of what was really going on in this conversation that basically started with a simple capture like that. That's where it started. And so this is where advanced ICue listening goes to. It gives you the most advanced. Now, to get to this level where the analysis is so deep and so comprehensive, to do all of that, you look at that and look at all that clutter, then look at our simple conversation yesterday on the board. Look at that.
Vast difference there, Rob. The amount of detail that we're drawing out of one conversation is just,
and to learn this, here's the tough part. To learn this is nothing like doing a checklist. The checklist is easy. To learn how to do advanced ICue analysis so that an event or a moment or a conversation or an engagement of some sort can make the unconscious conscious. That's what this tool does. To make the unconscious or the collective unconscious conscious, this method probably takes 2 weeks to learn from start to finish, and then using the software and so on. And I don't know a single person, Matt, who has not learnt this, who it does not help everything they learn way, way, way beyond just the bloody obvious in a checklist.
Yeah. As I said in our last post of part 2 video, I've been presenting this in HR scenarios as well, with exit interviews and whatever, and engagements that haven't gone well, and then presented this A to management and then B to executive level. And there's as much detail as is needed for each of those levels.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
C-suite doesn't want to know everything that went down. They just give me the highlights.
Yeah.
It is. But the management needs to know what went wrong. How do we fix? How do we work on that?
Yeah.
And then, they can have more information. But it's sensational. Yeah. And like 12 months down the track, we'll still be able to anchor to that and then bring up the conversation that we've had.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, a lot of people who say, well, this is a lot of work, Rob. It's actually, you can have a 10-minute conversation. You can map it like that, take a picture of it, put it in your filing system, either electronically or put it in physically if you want. And that is just as valid as any. In fact, the funny thing in the risk and safety industry, there is no prescription for how to do a risk assessment.
No, there just must be one done.
Yeah, you just do one. It doesn't matter if it's a visual verbal one or whether it's a checklist one. The reason why we do this is it gives you much, much more than a spreadsheet looking audit type, engineer type process, because again, there's no capture of visual, verbal, semiotic, relational, social knowledge.
Yeah. And if you use this style of the ICue engagement board, a incident investigation, in a serious incident investigation.
Oh, yeah.
one of those conversations will go down the path of what was the mood on the day.
Yep.
Whatever, how were the people on site? What was their thinking? That'll be a conversation come around to there. Because sure as hens lay little eggs, there's going to be a lawyer at the end of it. If it goes to court, who's going to ask you that very question?
Well, it's all of those cultural things which were unspoken on the day that actually show up.
Well, you don't know because you come along with a workspace checklist.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just going, that tells me nothing about what the feeling was on the day, what was happening.
Yeah. It was really interesting. I saw the other day, and we will have to close this video soon. I saw on the other day the Royal Commission into the Robodebt inquiry with this incredible dialectic and tension point between a politician who thought he was in front of a Channel 9 camera, an ex-prime minister, a King's Counsel who are the sharpest of sharpest lawyers, and a commissioner who is thinking in a different pattern, and they're thinking relationally, socially, legally, and ethically. And this guy in the dock is thinking he's in some sort of, political party room, and then being told things like, are you listening? Are you answering the question? Right. And this is coming out, and it was amazing, just to show you that the legal side of risk is perceived differently when you have a different method applied to it. And so if your application of everything to a risk or to an issue or to an event or to an incident is the same method all the time, which is a linear engineering type seeking an outcome, you'll never learn what you can learn with this. You'll only ever know that there's a Johnny Martin pageant. It's a commercial process. They make a lot of money and they're planning one for next year. You'll never get to the depths of what really is of interest to the unconscious of the other person you're talking to, and you're making the unconscious conscious. And then I hand it back to you, and whatever you do with your sisters, with your father on Christmas Day, that's your business. And that is where we create ownership. This model creates ownership. When we use a checklist, the owner of the risk actually jumps in a car and drives away in a ute.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's amazing.
That's why this one works. Okay, Matt, any other questions before I'll close the video with the wagging of the finger and I'll cut it back. And anything